Hello and welcome to the Week 6 edition of the Survivor Podcast, brought to you by thelines.com. I'm Matt Brown. That is Steven Anderson. If you are still watching this, good on you. Actually, maybe you're in a reboot. Whatever, it doesn't matter. We're glad you're here. Everything we do, absolutely free. Go ahead, hit that subscribe button. Let us know in the comments section. After you get done with this thing, who you are going to play this week, Steven. Yet again, not only a team of death, we get the number 1 selection and the number 2 selection go down in Survivor. It has crippled an already crippled pool down to a handful in just about everywhere out there. It wouldn't surprise me in some super shallow pools if there's 4 or 5 players left in those pools. You know, it wouldn't surprise me at all.
Yeah, I was in a pool with about 4,000 people to start. This is the one pool I have left, by the way. 4,000 people to start. We're down to 42.
Yeah.
So unbelievable, like 1%. And we're not even to Halloween yet, which is pretty wild. And even if you're in the rebuys, even if you're in the second chance pools, there's been just unprecedented carnage. And I say hats off to you people too, because this has just been nuts. The only reason I'm still alive in this pool is because I happen to have already used the Niners and the Seahawks last week. So just the way it is, man. I mean, we could handicap this as much as we want, but for a game that seems so simple,
yeah,
it is the hardest pool game contest, however you want to call it, in NFL betting, hands down, in my opinion.
It's funny because we get to, you know, you talk about your contest is down to only a handful of people. I mean, Circa started with over 14,000 entries.
Yeah, wild.
Another started the day on Sunday with 479, and then we go into week 6 with 227 people. I mean, Steven, 14,226 fan, whatever, and it's down to 227 heading into week 6 of the NFL season. If that does not tell you just how wild and bonkers this has been.
For $14 million, right?
Yeah.
I mean, anybody in that pool would have never dreamed in a million years that on October the 8th, they'd have about 1% of the pool left for $14 million.
It's so incredible too, because we've gotten to the point now where your ticket, like you would have never thought this early too, right? But like your ticket now in that contest is worth over $62,000, Steven. Like your entry is worth $62,000. Like you can start thinking about monetizing your ticket in week 6 of this contest because it's worth $62,000. Like it's crazy. Like it's just absolutely
check
bonkers.
your credit. Where can you, if you need a loan, because if it keeps going, I mean, you can try and middle these with underdogs, right? You know, just take a big underdog just to cover, and you might hit that and stay alive. But get your credit in order here. Get your loans in order here, because this is big time stuff.
We got an interesting week again. There are several big favorites out there, but there are also some teams that I think just as of today, whenever we hear some news that's come out in the NFL, that are at least interesting for us to talk about. We can talk about, you know, as we're talking like the biggest spreads of the week, Eagles over the Browns, Texans over the Patriots, Baltimore over Washington, Atlanta over Carolina, Green Bay over Arizona. Those are all at least 5.5 or bigger. There are a few 3.5s, and so on the other side of a field goal, you know, let's still consider those real, and that's Cincinnati and the Giants, Detroit and Dallas, Tampa Bay, New Orleans, San Francisco, Seattle. Everything else is going to be a field goal or less, and you know those are the ones we typically try to avoid, Stephen. But you know, when we go in and start to evaluate this, some of these teams that are favorites, that are big favorites, were probably your path along the way. Like a lot of people already use the Texans, right? And so even though the Texans are massive favorites over the Patriots, I would guess there aren't a whole lot of people who have the Texans left because that was one of the most popular selections in week 2 in order to be able to advance and even make it to week 6.
I completely agree with you. There's not many paths that would have survived to this point, so it makes it easy to see kind of which teams were the most likely to have already picked at this point. So, I mean, we're looking at Green Bay against Arizona, Philly against Cleveland. Let's just start there. Philly against Cleveland will be the most popular choice in survivor pools this week. You agree, right?
And if you're in a super shallow one, like we just said, if you're in one that's only got 10 or 12 people left, that should just be your pick and you just move on, right? Like at this point, you don't think about getting cute. You don't think about like whatever, because with 10 or 12 people, there will be enough people who try to get cute anyway, and let those guys get cute. And you just kind of like move on here. I think this is in a week in a NFL season, Steven, where everything has been absolute chaos. If the Eagles coming out of a bye, getting A.J. Brown, getting Devontae Smith, getting Lane Johnson, getting all those guys back, going up against one of the worst offenses I've seen in a very long time in the NFL in this Cleveland Browns team, if they can't figure out a way to get this done, then maybe Sirianni does need to be out of a job. But like I would play I'll put it this way. If I was in a pool that only had a handful of people left, I would play the Eagles. But, if you're in one that still has thousands or still has hundreds of people left, then maybe there's a bigger decision to be made.
Well, let's use me as an example, because I'm sure there's at least a handful of people watching that might have, somewhere in the middle there, right? Like 40, 50 people left in their pool. Let's quick math on that. Let's say like 15, 20 people out of those 40, 50 are going to use the Eagles. Do I want to stay away from them this week, or is that still in your mind a decent pick and you just move on and figure it out later?
Yeah, I mean, so I guess it would just be how confident are you in some of these other ones that you would have to go with? Because, I mean, here's the thing. Sure. Are the Ravens 6.5-point favorites over Washington? Yes.
Never picking that.
Right. It's like, should they win? Probably. But is there enough firepower on that Washington offensive side that if they can figure anything out on the defensive end, could they squeak out something like with the way Jaden Daniels has been playing on it? Like, I definitely think that's in the range of outcomes, right? Like,
they're the best offense in the league by advanced metrics.
Yeah,
of course it's in the range of outcomes. And I can't. So
I can't go there. Like, I couldn't go there with this one, right? Like I said, Houston most likely has been used. If you still have Houston, then yeah, I mean, like Houston's going to be starting Drake May. Like, it's his first NFL start. Sure, all day long, fine. If you want to go Houston, but again, they're one of the few teams that have won most every week. They're 4-1, and so like. You probably used them somewhere along the way. So I doubt that they're very available in your pool. Do you have the Texans available?
I don't.
Yeah.
No. I used them earlier.
Yep.
So I think for me, it comes down to, do I want to burn the Eagles even though they're going to be extremely popular? If it's not them, the three other games that stand out: Green Bay against Arizona, and then the two NFC South favorites, the Bucs taking on the Saints backup quarterback, but on the road.
Yeah.
And the Falcons, but on the road at Carolina. So that's what it really comes down to for me, is that kind of that group of games right there that I need to figure out. And if I want to play game theory and not play the Eagles just because of sheer popularity, because Matt, the popular team that we thought was fine has not worked very well.
Has not worked out very well. Yeah, well, for this, for sure. So I would say this. It is very intriguing to me. If you're in a pool where you had multiple entries, I do think the Bucs are very intriguing, actually. Whether it's Jake Haener or whether it's Spencer Rattler, it's an offensive line that wasn't good to begin with and now is down multiple starters. They're down the backup who came in for one of the starters that was out. I mean, like they are absolutely wrecked right now. I think that Tampa is at least intriguing this week, given what we have now at the quarterback position.
I completely agree, especially if we get some key players back on defense for Tampa Bay. If Cansey's back, if Winfield's back, if the New Orleans interior of that offensive line, McCoy's on IR, I think, so he's definitely out. Ruiz is out again, and you have Vea on that D-line for Tampa wreaking havoc with a young quarterback right in his face. All this lines up, even though it's a road game. I mean, Tampa got pretty unlucky in that Falcons game, in my opinion. I thought they probably should have won that game. And we saw that they can put up points, right? So if they get healthy on defense, I feel pretty strongly about Tampa, and they're probably going to be in my top 3 this week, even though the spread is only 3.5 versus a 6.5 for Baltimore.
Yeah, because this is just something we have to do, right? I looked at the hurricane pattern right now. The Hurricane Milton, if you have not seen this, is like just it's awful. It's Category 5. It's going to blast right. But the path doesn't it really does just kind of curve through Florida, and it doesn't go up. So Atlanta at Carolina. It might rain because there's just always like, hurricane. It spins off a ton of rain.
Right?
Yeah, it spins off a ton of rain, but like it doesn't look like the path of the hurricane's actually going to go through Carolina. So I think that game plays no matter what. Atlanta at Carolina is at least somewhat intriguing because we've now come back down to earth where we realize, oh, never mind, Andy Dalton's not the savior. Andy Dalton is not like, oh, Andy Dalton's career is revived. Like, no, it's Andy Dalton, right? It's still Andy Dalton. So, Atlanta is super interesting, and mainly Atlanta being super interesting to me, Stephen, for a couple of different reasons. One of which is Seattle, Tampa, Dallas, New Orleans, Denver bye. Chargers maybe by week 13, depending on where that Chargers team is at. But then it's Minnesota on the road at Las Vegas. Now, by then, Las Vegas might be punting on the season. But that's way the hell out in week 15. You're not using Atlanta again until week 15, week 16, most likely, and feeling great about the click. And so it comes down to a question of, You might not have to use 20 teams or 18 teams or whatever because your pool might be over by then. So there is that, but there is the question of if not now, then if at all with the Falcons.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I want to play devil's advocate a little bit with the Falcons. I feel like they've been one of the more fortunate teams in the NFL. I'm not sure they're as good as their record at the moment. I mean, they were a Saquon Barkley catch away from losing the Eagles game. They had some defensive and special teams craziness go their way in the New Orleans game. And then obviously the late game situations with Tampa Bay that worked out in their favor. So they are pretty darn close to being like 1-5 or, so 1-4, I should say. So I have concerns about them. Their defense is still an issue, right? Like the Atlanta defense is 21st by EPA per play allowed and 28th in success rate. So that's what gives me pause with Atlanta. Certainly acknowledge the future value argument you're making because there isn't much. But I still think they're kind of on an upward trajectory. I'm still not sure they're fully formed yet. It gives me pause considering that there are some other options this week that seem pretty comfortable. Just that defense and the road game and just the fact that I feel like they're not as good as their record does give me some pause here a little bit, even though Carolina's done what they've done in the past couple of weeks and have looked pretty bad.
So Green Bay is going to be at home against Arizona. They're going to be without Christian Watson. Maybe Romeo Doubs out there. Maybe he's not. Who knows? Apparently he just didn't show up for work last week on Thursday and Friday. And so that was the reason they ended up having to suspend him because he just didn't show up at the facility. So, oh, cool. He just decided, yeah, I'm done with this.
The guy's an NFL player. Like that's the kind of stuff that like would happen when I was working the cashiers at Target in high school. Like, what are we doing here?
So Green Bay against Arizona. Here's the only problem for me with Arizona. As bad as that defense is, and I mean they are bad. The offense is just feisty enough to where I think you're always going to be kind of like clenching your butt cheeks the whole time. You know what I'm saying? It's like. In that's not to say that Green Bay isn't a good play this week, and I think if I'm power rating these things, they would probably end up third for me as it is anyway. But like Arizona is one of those teams that you attack them because of the defense, while also understanding that the offense is good enough with Kyler and McBride and Harrison to maybe scare you late in the game.
Is Jair Alexander playing? Because that would make me feel a lot better.
Right.
If he's playing for Green Bay, that would make me feel a lot better because right now, I don't know. I don't know how much of that Rams game you saw last week. Didn't feel great about the Packers watching that game. Defensively, the Packers, this surprised me. I didn't expect it to be this bad. The Packers are 29th in success rate allowed so far this year. That really surprises me. So when we're talking Survivor and like what is a team's floor any given week, that's as bad as some of these horrendous defenses that we've been peppering overs on, right? With the Rams defense and the Bengals defense and the Cardinals defense. So that and Jordan Love has been prone to some mistakes coming off this injury with some interceptions.
For
so
sure.
it certainly gives me some pause here.
The Rams had a chance to win that game against them this past week. So it would not surprise me if at the end of the game there's a Cardinals scenario that's kind of the same, right? I mean, like that wouldn't surprise me in the least bit. And so there's always that's out there on the table with all of this. Is just that there are weapons there on Arizona's side. They can definitely move the ball, and if it only takes a touchdown to beat you towards the end of the game, it's going to be a little bit of a scary click.
I just want to see the Packers look more like they did at the end of last season before I'm jumping all in here in Survivor when I have so many other options this week. Maybe in a couple of weeks we'll feel better about how they look and Jacksonville's hit the eject button in week 8. Or in week 13, we're still playing Tyler Huntley in the Miami Dolphins. Right. So there's not a ton of future value with the Packers, but I just don't feel entirely comfortable with them at the moment.
The other couple of options that I'm guessing people might look at, the Bengals on the road at the Giants. I would never do that in a million years. And then Pittsburgh on the road at the Raiders, who are completely in dysfunction, don't know who's going to play quarterback, bench the quarterbacks. Devontae Adams wants out of town, all the different things that are going on there.
But who's at quarterback for the Steelers this week?
And that's the other problem. Tomlin left the door open for Russell Wilson to come back this week. And so do you really want to click your survivor life on Russell Wilson making his first start of the year,
Yeah.
It's probably not.
So I want to give one caveat here for people. Listen, most self-respecting survivor pools, you're not going to know what your opponents are picking until after lineup block. There are some that are showing you who everybody's picked before lineup block, if you look at the leaderboard. So double check. And if you see that, everybody's picking the Eagles, then maybe take one of these other teams. If you're seeing that, some people are sprinkling in the Packers and some are sprinkling in the Falcons and some of these other teams, maybe somebody's trying to get cute with the Steelers, well, then I'd be more inclined to just say, screw it, I'll take the Eagles this week against the Browns. Because, Matt, I'm with you, man. You said something earlier in the pod, and I completely agree with it. At this point, what can I live with, right? I've gotten this close to the finish line. What can I live with if it goes wrong? I can live with Deshaun Watson, who has been the worst quarterback out of, all but 5 third stringers, essentially, by the advanced metrics over the past few years. I can live with that. I can live with Jake Haener coming off the bench, who I've never heard of, with 2 backup offensive linemen in front of him, perhaps the third string offensive lineman at the one spot. I can live with him beating me in Survivor if that's how it goes. I'm not sure I can live with some of these other ones with going up against Kyler Murray, going up against it's never going up against Jaden Daniels at this point. I'm never taking the Ravens. I can't live with the Falcons losing when I know that they've been on a lucky streak here and have a bad defense, and certainly would never be able to live with myself picking the Pittsburgh Steelers offense. So that's kind of how I'm thinking about it at this point.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. If you go down betting against a guy who has settled more lawsuits than touchdown passes he's thrown since being with the Browns, then, it's it is what it is. And that's actually a true stat, by the way. He's thrown 19. He's thrown 19 touchdowns.
I'm laughing because it's true.
He's thrown 19 touchdowns since he's been a Brown, and he's settled 23 lawsuits since he's been a Brown. So he actually has.
Thanks for this, Jimmy Haslam.
Yeah,
really appreciate it.
It's one of those things where, getting both of the receivers back for the Eagles, getting Lane Johnson back, all the stuff like that. It's the real version of the Eagles this week that we're going to get, as opposed to the fake version we got the last time that we saw them. And so I would. If that takes me down, then so be it. But in a week like this, so my power ratings would be the Eagles, the Texans, and I understand most of you don't have them out there, but I will go against Drake May's first start any day of the week. Like that's for sure. And then, dare I say, third is Tampa Bay over Green Bay. It's one of the bays. Maybe it's just the bay. Just either insert bay here. But I mean, one of the bays, either Green Bay or Tampa Bay, where I would probably put them kind of third in the hierarchy this week.
If they win, they'll be your bay.
Yeah, exactly. Which bay do you like better? Do you like Green Bay or do you like Tampa Bay better?
I like the Tampa Bay, even though it's on the road because they're getting a backup quarterback. I'm going to keep playing some game theory. I'm not going to make the Eagles my number one pick, but they will be in my top 3. So I'm going to make the Tampa Bay Buccaneers my number one choice this week.
Okay.
I think it's just a great spot for them. The other part of that matchup we didn't discuss is the rest advantage. New Orleans has to do this after playing Monday Night Football. The Bucs got to play Thursday Night Football. So they got extra rest advantage here to get ready as well. So I'll take Bucs number 1 because I don't think they're going to be all that popular, even with the backup quarterback. I'll put the Texans number 2 against the Patriots. I'll put Eagles number 3 just because of popularity. And if you want to mix those up based on your personal preference, viewer, listener out there, by all means, go ahead. But I will just harp on do with what you do, make a decision based on what you can live with if it goes awry, because it's like every week this year where the lock that we think is going to happen is not the lock and they lose outright. It's just been insane.
Like if you play Baltimore, right, in a week like this where you have Philadelphia and you have Houston and you have some of these other games, if you play Baltimore and Jaden Daniels and that team goes in there and puts up 30-plus points, which remember, Cincinnati just put up 30-plus points on this defense, and they figure out how to get a stop that Cincinnati was not able to do. And oh, by the way, they were a bad hold away from losing anyway to Cincinnati, even with all of the stuff that went on. Would you hate yourself? And I think you would, because you'd go, oh yeah, I mean, you know what? This Washington offense has actually been really good this year. You know, their defense made 2 stops, and that's all that needed to happen, and that's what it is. So I think you make a very good point there, Steven, where it's just like, listen, if you go out, can you go out just saying, well, I mean, what the hell? That's how I wanted to play.
Do you want to tell your buddies you lost to Jaden Daniels on a hot streak, or that you lost to Jake Hayner?
Right. Exactly. Come on. Exactly. The decision is basically almost there for you when it comes to those two. So we're on the same 3 teams. It's just, in different order. I think that those 3 teams are the ones I would hone in on this week if I was you guys out there. And again, your decision should be influenced by how many people are left in this thing as well. Seriously, if you've only got 8 or 9 people or something like that, no need to get cute at all. Like, you just play it smart and you can win this thing. So just continue to do what you've been doing. We're in week 6. I cannot believe this thing has already gone to hell. I can't believe and props to you still being in. Props to the 227 entries that are still in Circa over there, because Lord knows that went crazy as well. So happy to have you guys here along for the ride. Upper right-hand corner, thelines.com is our Discord. So be sure, go in there, discuss all the way up until deadline. Like, you don't have to make a decision today, right? Like, we just get this to you early so you have stuff to think about. You can start to narrow things down and hone your opinion over the course of the week. Talk to other smart people. Talk to other people who are in Survivor still. See what they think about stuff and try to make sure that you have a decision that you feel good about moving forward. For Steven, I am Matt. Good luck on your week 6 Survivor play.